Welcome back to the BJJ Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ford. My guest today is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's also a 6th-degree red and white belt in Judo. He's an accomplished high school and NCAA wrestler and a 2-time all-state wrestler. He was a Beijing Olympics trials qualifier and a 2-time national Judo champion. He's also a 2-time world team member and a 3-time World Cup medalist. He was a Pan American Grand Prix silver medalist and a Sambo Pan Am's champion, as well as a Sambo world team member. He's a TGF New York Open BJJ champion. He's also the head instructor at Kikuchi Budo Institute in Manhattan, New York, and he's got a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in education. He's also got an MBA in finance and entrepreneurship. He's also a former college professor at Brooklyn College, Barnard. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be joined today for the second time in my podcasting career by Shintaro Higashi. How are you today, Shintaro?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ryan. It's great to be back. It's been a long time since I last saw you.
It's been a while, man. I was just looking back. I think it's been about 6 years since you were last on the show. So, we have a lot of catching up to do, man. I've been really enjoying all your YouTube content, and it's been cool to see all the growth that you're doing, man. Catch us up. What's been going on in the last 6 years?
Just my academies. I have opened up a second one, Kana Martial Arts in Chelsea, and I've been training a lot more Jiu-Jitsu lately at Essential BJJ with JT Torres. My main guy is still Brian Glick. This is my friend, right? I work out with him once a week, and he's the guy that I got my black belt from. He just did instructional with you guys, Brian Glick. But yeah, I've been training a lot and, doubling down on father duty. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and just, overall, just putting a lot of judo grappling content out there just for the world to, see and kind of, do, right? Because that's what we love to do.
That's incredible. That's awesome. Well, dude, congratulations on becoming a dad. And thank you. We just had Brian. I just interviewed Brian last week, actually. So that's really cool that you mentioned him. How long have you been training with Brian?
On and off, probably like 10, 15 years, man. We used to always do like a trade-off private situation. Like he'll come in, I'll do an hour of judo with him, and he'll do an hour of jiu-jitsu with me. So that's always sort of been my jiu-jitsu experience. But recently, probably about 4 months ago, I realized Essential Jiu-Jitsu is down the street from me. So I just kind of dipped in, and I've been training every day in the mornings because it's just perfect. It fits my schedule. People are nice. I just kind of walked in there and clicked, and I haven't been in a jiu-jitsu room in a very long time. So, I feel very at home there now.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong training under JT Torres. I mean, he's one of the best in the world.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah,
and then of course getting your black belt from Brian Glick. I mean, that's amazing too. He's an incrowdible instructor.
Thank you.
And man, and it's always great too when you can trade knowledge with someone like that. You mentioned that obviously with your judo background, that's very valuable knowledge that people are trying to get in jiu-jitsu. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool setup.
For sure. Yeah, there's definitely a synergy there. Judo, jiu-jitsu, grappling, wrestling, everything's kind of like jumbled together. Before in the old days, it's like, judo versus this or that or wrestling or that. But now people are really, commingling everything together, giving credit where it's due and sharing information. And everyone's cross-training now, It's an amazing thing.
It really is. And I love just seeing all the grappling styles kind of merging together. We see like wrestling and judo and sambo and jiu-jitsu all kind of working. And the rules are the only thing that separates us really. If it wasn't for the rule sets, it'd be grappling.
Yeah. I mean, we all have cauliflower here, right? We're all jacked, we're all bros in the gym. So, just the rules, man. That's it.
That's awesome. Well, Shintaro, man, you're one of the most highest ranked judokas I've ever had on the show. And something that's important across the board, both in judo and jiu-jitsu, is grip fighting. Grip fighting truly is an art within the art. And I feel like it doesn't always get as much attention as it deserves, despite how incredibly important it is. So I think you're the perfect guest to explore this topic with today, man. For starters, what do you think are some of the universal principles of grip fighting, I guess, that transcend specific grappling styles?
Okay, that's a very good question. And you're absolutely right. Grip fighting is so underestimated, overlooked. One of the most important things about grip fighting, if you lock up somebody 50-50, right? Like hand in the collar, hand in the sleeve, and they're mimicking exactly what you're doing, there's no advantages at all. Right. So when you know how to fight and for position, right? Gaining dominant position, what does dominant position even look like in stand up? I know this is BJJ Fanatics, so most of the listeners are like, okay, if you're in side control, you have advantage. If you have back mount, you have an advantage. If you're in someone's closed guard, it's kind of like, it's like 50-50, right? So it's like being in an even position and taking someone down from there is very, very difficult, especially in judo, because you're at arm's length distance, right? You're not closer like chest to chest when you're trying to throw each other in wrestling or Greco or freestyle, right? Even there's a lot of sort of advantages and disadvantages and such, So grip fighting, what it does is gives you a head start. If you can start in the better position with your hands, even if you're like seeking out hand position and putting the one hand on, there's moments when you have one hand on, they have no hands on, right? Because if you can take the initiative and have that hand on, and generally a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners might just lock up 50-50 there and then just kind of take it slow from there. Ultimately the goals and the rules make it so that, the guard pullers kind of have the advantage. I know IBJJ has kind of changed the rules recently, right? So in judo, you really want to be able to thread those moments. Like you put one hand on and be able to explode into a ippon senagi, an arm throw from there as you're gaming for the second hand advantage. So it really does offer the person who knows it a big advantage, in trying to take somebody down.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And it's funny, even in jiu-jitsu, like there's so much emphasis on grip fighting on the ground as well. Like in order to transition to the right places you want to be and take away the offensive efforts of your opponent, that grip fighting, that initial contact, man, that really is everything. And whether you're standing or on the feet,
Yeah. And I think the judo grip fighting is very, very refined, right? Because the moment someone has two hands on you and you have one hand on, or the moment someone has a good positioning over the back or something, they can control your posture. Usually at the highest levels, people are gone. They launch you, right? Because they're so good at these attacks. Yeah. And usually, sometimes it's a direct attack. Sometimes it's a misdirection, like, two techniques jumbled together where you make it look like you're going one thing, but you're ripping it to the other direction. Yeah. But on the ground, it's a little bit more leeway, right? Because you could give up a bad grip and it's not a huge deal. Like if you're sitting in headquarters or something and somebody has a collar grip, yes, he controls your posture, but that person's not gonna be able to submit that off of that in 2 seconds or even half a second. In judo, you have sleeve and collar and you could get launched in like half a second, right? So the consequences are much bigger in judo. Therefore, it needs to be refined a lot. And then, it becomes this whole sort of meta within a meta, right? And everyone is so ahead and evolved in there. So I think judo grip fighting is very, very it's intricate and complex.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that anyone that's ever tied up with a judo guy on the feet, for sure, I think would appreciate and agree to that as well. It's kind of funny. Like anytime I've ever had a standing exchange with a really good judoka, it seems like whichever grip I choose was the wrong choice or the wrong answer. Like they seem to have such a really deep understanding of the responses and the alternatives, and it's really impressive, man.
And, it really does come down to like sort of those small details. Like 1 inch might not seem a lot, and people talk about this like 1 inch, here there might make a huge difference, But this is the thing, right? If you're holding someone's collar and you're right by the chin, you could pulse on the chin and turn their head, kind of like a crossface. You go 1 inch down, now you can't turn their head, right? Because now you don't have access to the chin. So, obviously you could like shuck your hand up and then pulse on the chin still, but when there's downward tension and then your hand's about 1 inch away from the face, then it's very hard to game that hand upwards anymore. So that 1 inch really makes a huge difference when it comes to, going for like a crossbody assault or something like that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. The other thing about grip fighting is like we said, it's the first contact that you have in a match or a roll or a randori. Here's a question I'd be interested in hearing your answer on. What are some things that you can usually read within the first few seconds of grip fighting with someone? Like what can someone's grip fighting choices tell you about their ability or their strategy once contact is made?
Got it. Okay. So when you're like passing, let's say knee cup pass, right? There's sort of a preferred path. You either pass to the left, pass to the right, right? So when someone approaches your guard in open guard with their lead leg right, that they're leading with the right, and then et cetera, et cetera. And everyone sort of favors one side over the other. I don't know if you do Delahiva guard, but can you do Delahiva to both sides equally? Most people cannot, right? Similarly in judo, if you're standing with one leg forward, right, you generally turn to the opposite side. If your lead leg right, you're turning to your left, okay? So based on that, it changes which hand should go on first, okay? So if you're lead leg right, I'm lead leg right. If you reach with your right hand, if I have the collar hand out, it's very easy for me to turn to a short dominant side, okay? The turn's much shorter than going to my weak side because my left leg is back. You see what I mean? So based on how they come out with their stance, kind of changes the game a lot, and then now I'm really going sort of into the weeds, but like if you're lead leg right, I'm lead leg right, you're coming out and then your right hand's forward more, you might be a person that's going to switch lefty. So, right? So you're gaming sort of that. So these are kind of like these really minute things that are very, very nuanced. And it doesn't really apply to jiu-jitsu so much because there's not a refined turn throw game, right? When you're doing judo, people have spent 10 years, 15 years developing these massive turn throws. Yeah. You know what I mean? So when they have their hands on in that position, they are launching you. You're going airborne. So those short dominant side turns and hand position really, really matter. But if you're going against a jiu-jitsu player who has intention to pull guard, that stuff doesn't really matter so much, you know? So it's pretty judo specific, but I think the ideas and the concepts behind it can apply somewhat to jiu-jitsu, right? Because the more I do jiu-jitsu, I realize like, oh, you know, when the person gets that cuff grip on the pant, they're trying to do like a, you know, throw by or a leg drag or whatever it is, you know, you have to recognize these kinds of things and you have to game pummeling your leg and, you know, off balance in order to game a collar and such. So, you know, jiu-jitsu has its own grip fighting, but it's a little bit different than the judo grip fighting, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Yeah, it does. You know, for the, and I appreciate you elaborating, going into the weeds, as you said, man, because this is the kind of stuff that I think is really valuable for people to hear and understand. Let me ask you this: for someone that's more new to jiu-jitsu and new to grappling in general, what do you think are some important like demarcation points on the body to where to grab the grips? You mentioned sometimes that little inch can make the difference in the direction that you're going. So where are the most go-to demarcation points on the body or on the gi that you like to grab and encourage new people to do?
So generally, like there's different positions for different, you know, Mongolians have a certain style, Georgians have a certain style, like Russians like a certain position, and the Japanese are classic collar sleeve, you know? So like if you look at most jiu-jitsu guys, they do collar sleeve, you know, collar sleeve, right versus right, or collar sleeve opposite sided when they're mirrored, sort of like right versus left, right? So if I'm lead leg right, you lead leg left, and then we have our collar hand sort of crossing over and under each other. And then we have the sleeve, right? So when you're looking at positions like that, you want to see how close your hand is sort of to the head and the shoulders, right? Because a very, very low hand position by your mid stomach or something like that, that's not going to really do much for you because you can't pull their head down. You know, it's like wrestling. You want to control the person's head. You want to snap their head down constantly. Same thing with grip fighting. You want your hand in a great position to be able to pull their head down and post on them to create distance, right? So you're managing distance, like as with all martial arts, right? It's distance management, you know? So being right by the collarbone offers a very good, like you said, demarcation point. That's the position that you sort of want to be. And based on your judo style, you want to adjust upwards or, you know, stay down there, right? If you do like a drop sanagi game or like a, you know, like a kata-guma, like a fireman's carry kind of a game, you don't want to be too high on the collar because now, you know, it's just too high, right? You can't get underneath the person, you know? The hand on the collar, like deep collar, is more considered like a power grip where you could pull their freaking head down and stuff their head to the floor and snap their face down to the mat, right? But you can't really do that when you're sort of lower on the collar. So both games sort of have their own strategies involved, you know? So I would say start off right hand or left hand, whatever dominant hand that you have on the collar bone, right? So collar hand is by your collar bone. And I think that's a great starting point for most guys.
That's great. I appreciate this breakdown, you know, because Shintaro, I think a lot of people, the first mental picture that a lot of people have when they think of grip fighting is just breaking grips. But it really is much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, anticipating the other person's grip break is another one too, right? If you have two hands on, that person has to let go of that one hand to put two hands on one of the hands to break that grip, right? So if you could anticipate that movement, you could end up, right, with one hand on, they have no hands on. You know, so like playing that sort of a game where you're anticipating their grip break and attacking off of that, that's like the next level in, you know, because, yeah, you know, you hear guys, okay, fight for grips, grip fighting. And most guys are just breaking. And then they get a grip of their own and then they usually pull guard. And that's good for that game. It really is, you know, but if you want a more refined takedown game and if your opponent is willing to stand with you and go for takedowns, I don't know, maybe you have two guys that don't pull guard. They both have horrible open guards. They're both heavy guys who want to stay heavy top game, and they're fighting for that top position. Then, you know, you're going to need this type of skill, right? So, you know, yeah, try it out, right?
That's awesome. Let me ask you this. How significantly does your grip fighting game change if you're playing gi and no gi? Obviously, the material to grab on in the gi is a big variable, but does the concepts change dramatically?
A little bit, you know, in wrestling, they call it hand fighting, right? Yeah. So like in judo, it's like, all right, guys, we're going to do, you know, I don't know, 10 rounds of 1 minute grip fighting, pick a partner and go, you know, start off light, whatever. In wrestling, it's like, all right, guys, we're going to go hand fighting for 10 minutes straight or 5 minutes, 2 rounds of 5. So it's very similar, but the concepts are a little bit different. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot more pulling when it comes to grip fighting with judo and then retreating, right? Because you want to sort of pull their head down nogi, like there's not really much purchase when you hold on to somebody's wrist or their head, right? So there's a lot more pushing, I think. There's a lot more pushing, a lot more like clearing the arms and the arm drags and things like this. And it's not as sticky. Judo, when you have dominant position, good collar hand stripped, and now you're pulling them in, that person's locked in. That person's flying. In wrestling, you have a collar tie, right? They call it a collar tie, like good head control on the wrist. That it's not so sticky. You can't just rip it and turn, because it's slippery. You're just not grabbing onto anything, So like underhooks, body lock positions, those closer body to body contact positions matter more. So it's like gaming to get in order to throw. So it's quite different, you know what I mean? And also, like I said, with the collar position, depending on your game, if you're a wrestler and you're trying to do a lot of leg grabs, you want to snap them down. Maybe you force a front headlock game, the head comes up, then you shoot underneath, and then maybe you need 4 points, 5 points because you're down by a lot. Then you need to throw the person to the back for back points, correct? So now you have to kind of get through those barriers and then take them out of position and go chest to chest locking, whether it's a underhook in the head, arm, or whatever it is, right? So the goals are a little bit different, and the coordination for the first point of contact kind of is similar. I think the technical side of things, they're very, very different,
That's excellent, man. Something you said there is interesting. It's obvious now that I think about it, but it never really dawned on me before that when you have the gi on, you really are generating a lot more forward kazushi than you would in nogi, just because of the nature of the material. Obviously, we have things like arm drags and things like that, but normally, if you're grabbing the material, it's way more natural to pull the guy forward than it is to push him when you have a handful of something.
Yes. And, naturally, like by the same token, you look at sort of the reverse side of the coin, when you're locked up chest to chest, or not even chest to chest, but like arm's length distance with grips, now it's hard to shoot on the legs.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because now you can't clear the arms. In wrestling, they say if you want to shoot it on the legs, you have to clear the arms, the head, and the hips. Those are the 3 lines of defenses, right? It's when you're within arm's reach, grab onto a collar. Now you can't get rid of that arm, the barrier, the initial barrier, which is the arms, you know what I mean? So it changes, both sides with gi, no gi, it's a very similar sport, but, there's a lot more similarities than differences, I think, but it's different,
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. One thing that a lot of people encounter when they first start learning to grip fight is realizing how difficult it can be in the beginning, especially to break certain grips, especially someone that's got really strong hands. What kind of conditioning do you recommend people do? Do you do any extra conditioning outside of grip fighting to help with your grip strength?
Man, so this is like a sort of it's going to be like, people are going to be like, oh my God, he's going to say something that I don't agree with. And you get guys who throwing the gi up on the, on the pull-up bars and using their hands and doing all this stuff. Yeah. I think, more importantly, you want to preserve your hands more than anything, and there's a spectrum, right? Some guys walk in, they've been deadlifting their whole life. They deadlift 600 pounds. They have really, really good hand strength already. Some people have bigger hands. I kind of have smaller hands on the side of the spectrum of people my weight. So all those things kind of matter, but in terms of conditioning the hands, I think it's a lot more skill-based. For instance, like if you grabbed onto my collar right now and said, hey, don't let me strip this hand, right? And I try to strip it. Now it's my ability to push the hand off versus your hand strength. You know what I mean? But it's a lot more nuanced when you're actually doing judo, because the threat of attacking, right? Maybe you're not holding constant tension on the collar the whole time, right? But think about when you have like a De La Riva pant grip, you're not squeezing the whole time with your whole life. Like your life depends on it.
Sure.
So find the moments when they're maybe trying to adjust the collar up. Okay. Those little micro moments, which is like, 0.2 of a second or something like this, or even attacking and then the person losing their balance, and the universal reaction for people losing their balance is open their hand and catching their balance. You ever see someone like, oh, shoot, right?
Yeah.
So that always loosens the grip. So throwing in good sort of offensive attacks that like off balance them, and then using that to break the grips, whether it's one hand on or two hands together, like that's, much more important, I think, than just like gaining strength in your hands, and people already doing jiu-jitsu, already doing judo. Now they're going to go to the gym and do pull-ups on the gi did. I think it's just going to do more damage than good, I think. So having a good instructor that knows this stuff, I think it's key, man. You're always adjusting with the grip, right? You're never grabbing the collar and just squeezing the shit out of it. You're always trying to like incrementally inch the hand up. and someone's trying to rip it or whatever, you're trying to adjust. And those little moments where you could pulse the hand and then game that hand off, that's like, it's like magic, dude. Seriously.
That's incredible.
I know I'm sounding like a crazy, crazy person, but like it really is like magic,
That is incredible. No, I love that. It's very relatable for jiu-jitsu guys too, because it's the same concept as if you're like stuck in bottom side control, for example. They say that don't spend all your energy like trying to wrench the guy's face and try to force the guy's chest up and bench press the dude up. Wait for the moment that he gives you a little bit of space because he's trying to transition to mount or soming.
Yes, that's exactly right. What a good analogy. See, that's why they pay you the big bucks here. That's a good analogy.
No, but it's great. I've never heard someone correlate that into the world of grip fighting. So I really appreciate that. So you're waiting for the moment. Yeah, like you said, the guy's not squeezing the thing for dear life. Otherwise, he'd exhaust himself. So you're waiting for the moments where you can feel a little bit of looseness, a little bit of transition, a little bit of movement, and that's when you start putting a little bit of energy into breaking the grips. That's brilliant.
And this is the thing, right? This is like one of my main things that I always preach in with the shoulder roll sort of a thing for hand position, right? I don't know if you watched that video. Yeah. But when someone's holding that collar, right, and if the hand is stuck there, right, you could adjust the gi with downward tension to move the whole hand with the gi down, right? You could slide that hand down because the gi moves, right? And now all of a sudden he had good hand position. The whole gi and his hand slides down, right? Not the gi within the hand, but the whole unit slides down together because you squeeze it, right? And now he's like, oh, shoot, my hand's getting lower, even though I'm holding on the gi. I need to loosen to bite up on that gi. And when there's downward tension and he loosens to bite up, inadvertently, it goes in the opposite direction. You see? Wow. So now there's a little bit of panic, and that's a moment to be able to, blast through Osoto or even like just slam him in the shin, with something to make him think that you're going to attack their legs, right?
Wow.
And now you could easily cut that hand off because he's responding to the threat of, I might get foot sweeped and look like an asshole.
Yeah, right.
Right? So,
I love what you said though. Yeah, you really can like sometimes it's not necessarily attacking the direct problem. It's not attacking the direct obstacle of the hand on the lapel. It's you can manipulate the entire situation by moving the gi itself and causing that. That's really cool, man. I like that a lot. Yeah. Let me ask you, do you have like a particular map in your mind of options depending on what your opponent does with grips, or do you follow more of like a conceptual approach when gripping options and responses?
So there is like, all right, so like in case of right versus right, and I learned this from Jimmy Pedro when I was in my competitive years, right? I lived there for a year with Travis Stevens and Jimmy Pedro, and he was a huge grip fighting enthusiast. Not even enthusiast, he's an expert, right? And he sort of had like a basic roadmap, like right versus right. Where do you put your hand first? Option A, option B, and then these are the main lines of defenses. So there's probably about like 10 to 15 patterns that you have to memorize based on whether it's right versus right or right versus left. And those things are sort of drills, like it's almost like Kung Fu-esque, right? Or even like, when you boxing, you're a boxer, you box a little bit. I
box a little bit, yeah.
The guys the jab, cross, hook, cross, right? 1, 2, 3, 2, or something like this, right? Yeah. So you have these like pre-made patterns that everyone already do. Slip, uppercut, slip the other way, uppercut, right? Jab, jab, and then jab to the body, and then a 1, 2, something like this, when they're calling out on the mitts. So it's very similar to that idea. There is sort of like a already pre-packaged pattern, right? That it's already sort of, I know, and I could immediately do. So now you could read other things and then look a little bit deeper while these things are automated. Because if you're trying to say, okay, hand goes to the sleeve, I can't get it. It goes to the collar. I'm waiting. Option A is when the guy comes over the top and I'm trying to catch it, and boom, it's already too late. So these things have to be already drilled. It's like boxing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because there's people who it's always interesting hearing the way that people process martial arts and training. Like some people really do go in kind of a linear form of, okay, he does option A, I do B. If he does B, I do C. If he defends C, I do D. And other people think more of a more dynamic and more holistic kind of approach. Yeah. And to me that seems way more manageable than trying to keep like a catalog in my head of exactly what to do if A and B happens.
I mean, the most important ones, right? Are the most important ones. And I like the holistic approach, like you said, right? The conceptual approach. Yeah. But you need this. It's a fundamental. It's like learning the scales in music. If you don't know the scales in music, like, okay, the key of A is this is a scale, and you be able to play through all the scales, then, you're missing a big fundamental piece of it. And, there's jazz musicians that, I don't want to say don't know, but there's musicians out there that don't know, not great with scales or whatever it is. Can they still sound, look great, and do all this stuff? Yes, but all the best musicians in the world can know their skills, right? So in judo too, it's like you can't memorize every single combination ever. There's no way you could do this. Every single threat. Okay, guy right versus right. He switches left. He reaches his left, and then as he's going for Kosoto. What is my option there? Read that and then respond to it. In this linear way, like that's impossible. There's too many options, right? But you could have a couple of patterns memorized, and then you're looking for all the things, right? And then the rest of it is kind of feel, training, all this stuff. I hope that's. Hope you understand that. Kind of rambling.
No, it's awesome. I love the comparison to music too. Because it really is like if you don't know your scales and your chords, you got to know those basic pieces. That's interestingly why I suck at guitar too. But I can throw it in. I can throw. But I can throw it into overdrive and just like shred, and it's saying you wouldn't know any difference until you ask me to play something more intricate. So let me ask you this. We talked earlier about how. You don't particularly emphasize a whole lot about conditioning and strengthening of your grips but instead you focus more on technique. What about recovery? So when someone's doing a lot of hand fighting, when you said okay guys, let's hand fight for 10 minutes, that man, you can beat the shit out of your hands in some grip fighting. So what do you like to do to recover and keep your hands healthy?
Yeah. So, I said I don't personally do a lot of the grip strength stuff, but I've already at a point where my hands are strong enough.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. So, if you're kind of new in the game and, I don't know, you've protected your hands your whole life because you're a pianist, right? Now, maybe you do have to strengthen your hands a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't want to say if you're out there, don't train your hands. I'm not saying that at all, but lifting weights always, carries over because if you're doing dumbbell rows or something like that, you have to hold on to the dumbbell, So I would say something like, all right, if you're going to do dumbbell rows and, granted, maybe you're insanely strong already and the hands are your weakest point, then you may use straps, right? But if you're that guy that's already kind of I need to gain grip strength, your back's probably doesn't need that much stimulus either, right? Because your back is probably not significantly stronger than your hand. So just be in the gym, doing what you can when it comes to bent over rows or something, you're not using straps. I think that's good enough to make your hands stronger.
Yeah, sure.
And then learn this stuff. In terms of recovery and things like this, I do lots of drills where it's touch drills almost, right? So coordinating first hand on, doing light grip fighting where you're trying to preserve your hands more than anything. Because you do get jammed up fingers and all this stuff when you're doing judo, jiu-jitsu all the time. So doing these drills where you're kind of like boxing, but you're going 30% to the head or something like that. You're just kind of going, you're touch fighting almost. And then when someone tries to strip it, you don't fight it. Right? You just let it go and then transition to other stuff. Person wins grip fighting, right? That person holds it for 2 or 3 seconds, break the posture, plays, snap you down, and then they let you either restart or work out of it.
I like that.
So these kinds of drills kind of make it so that it's not too taxing on your hands. You know what I mean? If you go hard grip fighting 10 minutes straight, your fingers will beat up.
Yeah, totally. So
you kind of have to alternate these kinds of things, right? And there's sometimes you just have to do hard grip fighting. And there's some guys, when you're doing 10 rounds of anything, you have hard rolls, you have flow rolls, you go with someone, 50 pounds lighter, choose bottom open guard to work on your bottom open guard, right? So you're kind of differentiating each training. And I think that's the best way to preserve your hands, because you can't just grip hard all the time. And some freaks out there can do it, but most people cannot, when you watch the best guys in the world talk about it, I do this and I do this many pull-ups and I bench like that. That's not, guys already gifted. Yeah. That guy spent 30 years doing this stuff. A lot of the advice that he has is skewed and he has survivor bias. Yeah, I'm not saying not to listen to those guys, but the regular person doing jiu-jitsu, the average guy, maybe even above average guy, the majority of the people has to preserve their hands because if your hands are messed up, man, you're not gonna be able to do this stuff anymore. You want to do it long term, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think what you're also describing here emphasizes the idea too that successful grip fighting is not just hanging on and not being unbreakable with your grips. It's also just being able to get to the right positions and know when it's time to let go and move. So it sounds like you're almost training yourself in that way, not only to preserve your hands, but to be a more effective and efficient grip fighter, anyways.
Yes, effective and efficient. That's the key, man. You just nailed it. Those are the 2 words.
Yeah, that's excellent. So let me ask you this. Speaking of efficiency and inefficiency, what do you think is the single biggest gripping mistake you see people make, both in jiu-jitsu and judo?
I think in judo, mostly reaching with the wrong hand first, right? So generally there's a defensive hand and a, offensive hand, right? It's like boxing, you know what I mean? right versus right, reaching with the right leg. If you're wrestling and stuff like that, you don't reach with your lead leg forward, right? Because you expose that lead leg.
Yeah.
Similarly, in gripping, I see guys who are lead leg right, lead with their, looking for that collar grip with their lead leg, it exposes that lead leg, And then if you have a turn throw to that direction, it's like I said, it's a short dominant side turn, you might get launched. So that's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes, knowing which hand to reach with first. And then the second mistake I would say is like not breaking patterns, right? So you go, like I just said, we're talking about one hand on first, right? Looking for sleeve lapel with this offensive hand, and the other hand sort of camped out playing defense. And those two things have to work simultaneously together, right? Reading your opponent. So that's what's really tricky. It's like playing the drums, you know what I mean? Your foot's doing one thing, your other foot's doing the other thing, right? And then you're like mixing and matching. So those things have to go simultaneously, And every now and then, because everyone at the highest level knows all the patterns, you have to be able to break it, right? So you're doing all the right things, okay? Sleeve lapel with the offensive, defensive with the other hand, third or fourth exchange, maybe like a minute into the match, you just put two hands on real quick, right? And just both hands on at the same time. And then, it surprises them because they're not, right, expecting it.
Yeah, it goes
right?
against
So every
the
now and
pattern,
then, yes, exactly. And like I just said, you don't grab with the right hand first on the collar, but every now and then you do, just to break up the pattern because you're not ready for it. If you do it 2 or 3 times, they can read it and they can throw you with it, right? But if you never do it and you're doing all the right things, out-gripping them, all the right things, out-gripping them, snapping down, attacking, and then all of a sudden you put 2 hands on immediately, snapping down, you throw him, and then you get back up 2 minutes in, you grab with the wrong hand, they're like, whoa, shit, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But you have a system to that side too, right? You have an attacking system off that wrong-sided, position, right? For me, it's lefty Ponse Nagi, Tanya Toshi. Those 2 little misdirection things that it's a one shot. It's something like a little ace in the hole. You know what I mean? It's like a surprise attack kind of a thing. So now they're like, oh, shoot. He knows all the patterns. He comes at 2 hands once, and then every now and then he reaches with the wrong hand, right? But percentages are usually I stick to the main lines and the main defenses because, that's where most people live, right? Breaking that pattern, going back to it, breaking that pattern, going back to it. That's sort of like higher level judo. And I think most people make the mistake of just doing the prescriptive stuff. It's like when you learn jiu-jitsu, everyone knows, right? Oh, Dela Hiva, okay, step over the leg, clear that Dela Hiva hook, and now we're going to go knee cut. Everyone knows this. Yeah. Right? So it's like, I'm having trouble with it. Okay, let me show you. And then they give the same instruction. You step over and you clear it and you go knee cut, right? Oh, I can't. Right? But, where's the nuance? You know what I mean? And a great instructor will kind of give you sort of the finer details, the in between the line stuff that's going to help you kind of break through that. You know what I mean?
That's how.
And it's like meaningful feints, really making it look like I'm going for folding pass, but then cutting back to the knee cut, and that is a nuanced thing. And I think that's, what's really missing for most people when they do gripping.
Man, I love that. That's outstanding. It kind of reminds me of like in boxing, we talk about, disrupting rhythm, you know what I mean? Like,
yes. There you go.
Yeah, like someone that's a master of that is Floyd Mayweather. Like he'll throw combinations at one speed, and then all of a sudden he'll throw a shot that's 20% slower than the last shot he threw, just to throw the rhythm off. And then he slams you with something else. And like you said, it's very applicable to jiu-jitsu and judo. It's all combat sports have the same
I love how everything I say, you say it like just a little bit better in a more concise way. Jesus.
Well, what I love too is that you brought up the topic of pattern recognition, because that's something that I'm personally trying to improve upon myself. So I have a condition in my feet called hallux rigidus. It's a very new diagnosis I just got. It's basically it's like arthritis in the big toe joints. So it's kind of changed the way I have to approach my takedown game. Like I can't drop levels into singles and doubles anymore because I can't bend my toes back that way without extreme pain. Man. So I've actually been watching a lot of your videos. A lot of your YouTube channel is awesome. I've been studying a lot of your Russian Thai instructionals and your foot sweeps. And the foot sweeps is the part where I'm really starting to realize, like, man, I suck at pattern recognition with the feet when I'm not dropping levels and shooting in and penetrating for a double leg or a single leg. So what are some tips you would give someone that wants to improve their ability to understand pattern recognition, particularly with the footwork?
Well, so first and foremost, with footwork and like foot sweeps and stuff like that, you have to be able to keep your balance, right? So it's tough because all of a sudden, that's that timing it's not so much like a visual recognition, but it's also a feel, right? Because it's like a tactile kinesthetic thing happening. So you're making the shapes of the move. You have to be able to make the shapes of the moves. You have to be able to time it while keeping your balance, you know? So being able to sort of like do drills on someone that's cooperative and being able to reduce the speed, okay? Reduce the speed, the whole everything together, right? So you're making normal steps, but at a slower rate. That's going to help you with your timing, right? Because what happens a lot, hey, let's go slow. You're going slow, you're going slow, you're going slow. The better than quick feet, that throws off the timing, right? So understanding that, you know, grip fighting. And then when you're in dominant position, it's a lot easier to move the person because you can pull their head down more, right? If your hand's down low on my chest and my hand's right behind your neck, I can pull your head down with a lot of force, right? Sure. But you can't really pull my head down, which means I'm going to have an easier time keeping my stance, keeping my balance. And in that way, I can sort of make you step in the way that I want to make you step, and then therefore making it a little bit easier for me to time the foot sweeps.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, so doing that in the context of grip fighting, dominant position, taking them out of their stance, creating movement, and then timing it in a cooperative way. Like that's a great drill to be able to do. And you can do this shit for hours. Russians are known for this. Like just like flow rolling almost, right? Going for stuff, trading positions. There's no winning or losing. You just go in and out of stuff. Sometimes you pass my guard, you know, I turtle, I roll for the stuff. You're just giving, exchanging position, looking for timing, just absorbing all of it.
That's
right?
outstanding.
And that helps with pattern recognition, you know, because if you're like, hey, this is technique of the day, I'm just going to try to get that. It may not present itself, you know, and you're just thinking, folding pass.
Right.
And then nothing ever works, you know?
That's excellent. I appreciate that. I appreciate you letting me selfishly use my position here to pick your brain on my struggles. Let me bring it back to grip fighting. So, how does your grip fighting strategy change depending on your opponent's size and style of play? Does that play any factor into how you might initially approach a grip?
Yes, for sure. You know, having longer arms with longer reach, like they could grab your collar. Like, for instance, I fought Lucas Kripalik, who's like a 2-time Olympic medalist. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, he's like 6'4", 6'5", and I'm, 5'9" on a great day, you know? Right. So, he's posting on my chest or my neck and like, I can't reach him. I can't reach his collar. I physically just cannot reach his collar, you know? So there has to be, and at that highest level, he's so refined. He's so good. It's not easy for me to just kind of like, oh, this is what I got to do and go do it. Right. But similar body styles, somebody not as good, I have answers to it, so you have to be ready for that kind of a taller sort of height discrepancy. You know what I mean? If you're fighting in a heavier weight class and people are strong, you really want to keep them off your neck and head because they have a lot more weight to be able to, yank you down. They're stronger, right? Sure, yeah. So having that kind of a thing, back in the day when leg grabs were allowed, if I got out gripped to the top side, I could always just drop underneath and shoot it on the leg and then hope for the best, right? But when they took out leg grabs, I had to find different ways to bail out of bad positions. And now when I get out gripped and they're constantly trying to snap my head down, I go for tomonagi. Sacrifice throws that transition me from standing to ground. Like, it's essentially a guard pull, I can
totally relate with training with someone that's much taller. That's always like one of the hardest body types to deal with. I had a training partner of mine that was like 6'4", 6'5", and man, I would just walk right into like his Georgian grips. He would just get right around.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, it was just like effortless for him, and it was so frustrating for me. So
yeah, the Georgian grip system, man, that's a whole nother bag of stuff, and if you don't have an answer to it, sometimes the best thing to do is pull guard, but people don't want to do that. Then you got to go tomonai. You got to go for a sacrifice throw, like a meaningful attack, right? To kind of offset their balance, to get out of that position so you don't get bombed,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, great advice, man. Shintaro, I'll tell you what, we've reached a point of the show here where I always play a game with my guests, and I believe you played this before. This is a game called the pummel. The pummel's a series of random questions. It's like a lightning round. Some of them have, some of them are related to jiu-jitsu. Some of these questions have nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. But I'd love to play this game with you again if you're down.
Okay.
All right, man, let's do it. Question 1, what's the worst job you ever had?
Worst job I've ever had? Wow, that's a really good question. I know I'm supposed to like fire it off, but man, boy, is that difficult.
Don't worry about it.
I mean, I did corporate sales for a little bit, and after I was like, oh, I didn't make an Olympic team, I'm going to go out there and try to get a real job. And I did corporate sales, and little by little, every day I was kind of dying on the inside. You know what I mean? I was like, we had these like client dinners that I had to go to, and they would cut into sometimes they would go late, and then I couldn't make my training or something, and boy, did I freaking hate it. And then I told myself, man, this 9 to 5 stuff might not be for me.
Yeah, Sales in particular can be rough, man. Especially like what you mentioned, like your soul, like feeling like your soul's like I sold for 2 weeks. I sold cars just to try it.
Wow.
And dude, I came home every day feeling like I had to take like 3 showers. I just felt like I felt terrible, man. I'm like, oh God, it's such a grind.
See, I was selling something crazy. I was in pharmaceutical sales, and I was selling you wouldn't even believe it, vaginal cream.
Oh, are you serious? Wow. Okay.
I swear to God, man, it was estrase cream for like older patients experiencing dyspareunia. I had a Enablex, which was like an anticholinergic for urologists. So I was calling on urologists and gynecologists all day and night.
Wow. Oh, so you're selling direct to health
doctors,
providers.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I was doing that for like a year and a half, and boy, did I freaking hate it after. It was cool wearing a suit, in the beginning, right? Sure. Like, oh, wow, I can wear a suit, go to work. I'm employable, making use of a degree that I never thought I'd use. And, that lasted I gave that up.
Yeah.
Hated that job.
I can imagine. Well, hey, at least you were selling direct to the provider, because that's a completely different sales pitch if you're selling those kinds of creams to direct customers. It's like a totally you'd have to really know like all the ins and outs of everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think is a secret talent that you have? Something outside of martial arts that people might not know?
Secret talent that I have. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I do a lot of real estate investing and stuff like that. So I'm like a very big consumer when it comes to like self-help stuff, informational stuff. I very vigorously read a lot of like nonfiction books,
nice.
To kind of help me propel my other stuff, other pursuits. But it always kind of comes back to martial arts. You know what I mean? And I did a couple of, real estate deals. I have a couple of Airbnbs, but, did I love it at the end of the day? Not really, So I circle back to the martial arts loop, and, like right now I'm, doing tons of jiu-jitsu right now. And do I really need to be doing jiu-jitsu? No, but I freaking love it. The bulk of my time now, I probably spend 20 hours in the gym, maybe even a week, just grappling.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well, dude, having like financial know-how, and you mentioned you got an MBA in finance. I mean, it's incredible, man. It's cool that you're making that work through Airbnbs and real estate, man. The
MBA was really cool, man. Just because you're in a room with all these people who have real careers, right? So like here and there, struggle the 9 to 5 situation and going, and then you're in there with people with various backgrounds from different industries, So, being able to network with those guys and feeling it was a big validation thing for me too. It's wow, I guess I can be in here and not sound like dumbass,
That's awesome. That's incredible.
So that was kind of a nice thing. Yeah. I guess that's a secret talent, I guess.
It definitely is, dude. Yeah, that's absolutely.
I could read, not illiterate.
I read good. That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome, man. What do you think is your favorite bad food to eat?
Bad food that I eat all the time that I probably shouldn't be eating as much. I mean, man, that's endless, man. I love Shake Shack. I love pizza, and I love sweets. Nice. I crush Ben & Jerry's. I do eat like a pint easily in one sitting after dinner too. So, if I don't work out, I could be obese, right? So I got to really watch myself. So when I get injured, I really, really have to watch it. I count calories. I step on the scale every day. I'm mildly obsessed with it, right? Because it's a weight class sport that we're in,
Absolutely.
So yeah, ice cream, pizza, and burgers, man. Those 3 things, I can't get enough of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny, the pint of ice cream thing, dude. Like I can go through a pint of ice cream real easy too. And sometimes like I'll read the serving size, and it's something like like half a cup. I'm like, dude, who the hell eats half a cup of ice cream? Yeah, I have a pint. It comes in the bowl. I just take the lid off. It's a pint.
A pint is the actual serving.
That's the serving size.
That's one serving. If I'm gonna eat ice cream, I'm gonna eat a pint.
Exactly. I waste my time.
Not advice. For anyone, but
Yeah, sit here and waste my time with half cup servings. What are we doing here?
Come on.
What's your most hated food? What's something you can't eat no matter what?
I don't like shiitake mushrooms.
Oh, okay, yeah,
not a big fan of that.
Is it a texture thing or a flavor thing?
A little bit of both, I'm not crazy about it. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I like vegetables, but I don't love them. Okay. I eat them because it's healthy for me. Like right now I'm about to order a salad. And would I rather something else? Yeah, I would rather order Shake Shack, but salad's probably the best choice, right? So, yeah, one of those guys.
Good call. I like it. Yeah. Who do you think is your favorite grappler of all time?
That's a very good question, man. Grappler is different from judoka, I feel like. You know what I mean? I would love to pick somebody that's a little bit more well-rounded, but, I just can't. This guy, Kosei Inoue, was one of the best judokas, and I grew up watching this guy. He has the most spectacular throws. He has the most unreal highlight that you've ever seen, right? So, guys, look up Kosei Inoue on YouTube, right? And, he's one of my favorites, man. And, he kind of changed the face of how the culture of Japan and judo works, because it was very toxic for a very long time. Beating the kids, pushing them through, making them do crazy stuff, but he kind of had like a more positive reinforcement approach where he's like, we got to do something about the culture because it's not right, and everyone was against that. It's like, what is this guy talking about? I've been doing this forever with a lot of success, but when he became one of the most dominant Olympic medalists in the history of judo, people were like, all right, we'll listen to this guy for a little bit. So now it's very different. Now, so he, has a different approach, different pedagogical way about bringing up athletes and such. And, he's definitely one of my main heroes, when it comes to this. Yeah. And, Brian Glick, I gotta throw him in there too, man, because he's the most unassuming person. You met him.
Yeah.
Dude, no, you will never think that this guy was a high-level grappler because he's very lean. He's a little bit older, but dude, this guy is so freaking skilled, man. I can't even. His technique is so good and sharp. I've never seen anything like it. It's unparalleled. Usually the guys who are good, who I follow and listen to and stuff like that, and grappling, they sort of have the look too, right?
Sure.
Big dude, strong dude, lift weights. All not Brian, man. He's just pure technique, skill. I really respect him.
That's awesome. That's so cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, I love the reasons that you picked Inoue as your favorite grappler. I also love the reasons that you mentioned Brian. And yeah, Brian, man, he's someone that everyone from Gordon Ryan to Michael Zenga to like lots of yourself now, lots of people just praise him for his knowledge and his abilities.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of someone being unassuming. What's the whole thing like Hoist Gracie? If you look at like for all the people that got into jiu-jitsu because they saw Hoist do his thing in the early days, he was pretty unassuming too. And then you see the jiu-jitsu, it's just like, wow, man, it's unbelievable. It's even more impressive than if it was some big jack dude, So what do you think is your let's see, pick another one. What's your biggest phobia?
Phobia. I had a health scare last year. I had a stroke last year.
Oh, really? So, you had a stroke last year?
I had a full-blown stroke, man. I was in the hospital for 5 days and everything.
No way, dude. I had no idea.
Yeah, man. So it just came onset. I was in the gym and I didn't collapse, but my right side was completely useless. I fell over a bunch of times and I was actually in the gym for like 20 minutes, trying. I was like, what the fuck's going on?
Wow.
It was pretty scary. Went to the hospital and all that stuff. And, that moment when I'm lying in the hospital, they're like, okay, your stroke, your fall risk. So you can't get out of that bed. So you don't really know to what extent, you're disabled or not at the time. Right.
Oh, man.
So lying there, like being face to face with like, oh shit, I might not be able to do what I love ever again. That was really scary. You know what I mean? So, being back there, actually I made a full recovery, by the way. So thank
God
right?
for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, having my abilities taken away, all this stuff, and then I can't do what I truly love. Like, that's one of my biggest fears. You know what I mean?
I can imagine. Yeah, so if you don't mind me asking, is that something that's common in your family? Do they know, is it genetic? Is it something that, did they know what might have caused it?
Yeah, so like, I was having some AFib stuff, and I think that's sleep apnea related. I think a lot of grapplers and big guys tend to get sleep apnea. But, I snored or whatever it was, and never really looked into it or anything like that. And I was always like felt like my heart rate would go a little bit too high. You know what I mean? So when I'm working out, it was like, wow, my heart rate's going crazy, but I just assumed it was a normal thing, and I'll just kind of grind through it.
Yeah.
It wasn't until after the stroke that they put me on a heart monitor, and they told me like, yo, what are you doing Monday, Wednesday night, 7:45, whatever it is? Like, no, judo. They're like, your heart rate's in the mid 200s. It's like your heart rate's like 240, 250. But when you've experienced that so many times, you just don't know any better, right?
Sure, yeah.
So you're like, oh, this is what happens when you work out, So I left that kind of just unattended, like, just kind of like letting it be, just grinding it through for years. And then, that shit causes a stroke, right? So, we addressed it. We're good now. You know what I mean?
I'm so happy you're okay, dude. That's really scary,
thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting.
So that's one of my
'cause-
fears. You know?
Yeah, I don't blame you.
helps
That's definitely, that's definitely that would be a phobia for anybody in that situation. I think, it's obviously statistically very rare, but there are people that have experienced like getting choked in jiu-jitsu in training, and then having things happen like strokes due to the pressure on the carotid artery. So I was curious if it was something to do with that, or if it was something more
I don't think so, but
yeah,
I think it's a heart-related, sleep apnea-related thing. You know, but I'm on it, man. I'm getting all my bloods checked, everything checked. I'm on it.
That's I'm so happy.
It's like tough it out was kind of the motto, right? And then it catches up to you. You know, I'm a little bit more against that kind of methodology, even more so now. You know.
That's excellent. I'm very happy that you're okay, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us too, because I had no idea. A final question for the pummel game, man. A zombie apocalypse breaks out right now in New York City. What's the first thing you do?
Oh man, go to my Airbnb upstate in New York, man. That's it's in the mountains. There's 5 acres. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Buy some food, stock up. I won't take my Tesla. I'll take a gas-powered car.
There you go. Yeah.
Because right. And that's it, man. Rally the troops and then take all my people. You know, my daughter, everybody that I can potentially count on. Assemble a team, really, right?
I love it. Excellent, man. So you definitely have you're in a good place, man. You got the location to bug out to. You got tough people around you that can form a good team. I think you'll probably survive. That's good, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And Shintaro, that was the final question for the pummel game. Congratulations, you win. You got your double underhooks.
Yeah, awesome, amazing.
Shintaro, one of the most frustrating experiences in both judo and jiu-jitsu is when you get your grips on your opponent and they get their grips too, and then they lock their arms out and they frame away from you. It's a really frustrating situation. What obviously it ruins your ability to manage distance, and it ruins your ability to shoot in and drop levels. Very annoying situation to deal with those stiff arm frames. What are some concepts that you like to use to deal with that?
So grip fighting is grip fighting out of those positions kind of nice, but sometimes very difficult if you're stiff arming, they're tense, because their whole upper body's tense, right, through their arms and their chest. So in that way, maybe like retreating a little bit and showing like a feint, like a real attack, like maybe like a pulling guard attack. Because naturally, when you pull guard on somebody, you sit your weight down and you sit your weight back, okay? And you have to pull your arms, because if your arms are extended and you're hanging out, you're going to get arm barred, right? No one wants that extension. So you show that you're going to pull guard, or in judo's case, tomonage, okay? Because we like to do tomonage as an actual attack to throw the person, more so than just, transition to the ground. So you retreat, show that feint, and as they're responding, you cut one of those hands. So that's one of the things that I go over on the stiff arm, like whatever video that, we did. That's
excellent. That's outstanding. No. So in other words, there are things that people, when they stiff arm away from you, they inherently do make themselves susceptible to certain things, like you mentioned the tomonage and
Yes. Yeah. You kind of have to change your game plan a little bit, because closing the distance becomes extremely hard, right? So you make it look like you're closing distance, then you might have to retreat, or finding the right angles where the arms kind of flare outwards, right? Because like a pec fly is a lot weaker than a bench press. So find the right angles of your body, shifting your weight in that way, and then attacking the feet, and then just sort of entering the gaps of the arms, like in the middle section, so separating their arms in a certain way. All those things kind of have to play together. Your strategy has to kind of change. And, this is not something that most people talk about in the judo world either, because in competition, if you're not engaging to try to take the other person down, you can get penalized, right? Because there's a heavy penalty cost when it comes to this stuff. Because they want the people to engage, to throw each other, just like it's all sports, even in jiu-jitsu, same thing, wrestling, right? So, when you're in the room and you're trying to have a good practice, it's sort of a skill that you kind of need in order to have a good practice, because a lot of guys are very defensive. People don't want to get thrown, getting in your guard pass is one thing, getting thrown on your head is another one, So a big, strong guy, somewhat intermediate, most of the time they're going to be tense and stiff arming, and if you don't have an answer to that, you're not going to have a good training practice, right? Because you can't get to the positions in order to work on them,
Absolutely. No, and that's something, it's interesting that you mentioned like intermediate level people, because I've even seen like day one people who they don't quite know what to do. So they get a hold of your gi and they just lock out and try to do everything they can to keep you away and maintain that distance. It can be even for someone that doesn't have a lot of training, it can be very frustrating to deal with. So what when it comes to like getting around those frames, does body types add any kind of different variables that you like to emphasize? So you have a tall guy,
bigger, stronger guy. Definitely. Bigger, stronger guy, always the more difficult. Taller guy is much more space to go through, but when their arms are locked out, you could always go in the opposite direction in the same way, right? Where their arm length doesn't really matter as much, But yeah, always, man, like if your arms are locked out and they have long legs, they could reach your legs and maybe your legs can't reach them, so you may not be able to meaningfully throw feints in there using your legs for using your foot sweeps because, the guy's like, this guy's like, so much shorter than me. So body size and length like that matters. In that case, Tomoe guard pull is going to be a lot more useful because a shorter guy can get underneath the taller guy more, right? So different sort of strategies for different body types, as with everything,
That's excellent. Well, man, guys, if you're out there listening and this is something that you're struggling with, Shintaro has an excellent instructional with us. He's actually got several instructionals with us, but this one in particular I really enjoyed. It's called Breaking Through the Judo Stiff Arm, and it's available right now at bjjfanatics.com. So you guys make sure you go check that out and get that knowledge. Shintaro, man, I know you got to run, man. In closing, what are some of your major goals for 2023?
2023. There's a part of me that has awoken that sickness, after having that stroke last year, after being in another jiu-jitsu room, potentially maybe getting back on the mat in a competitive way, right? Because I know I hung it up for judo maybe like 5 or 6 years ago when my daughter was born. And, being in that hospital, that kind of made me feel a little bit like, oh, man, like maybe there's still more grappling left in me. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I don't want to go out there unprepared. I want to know all the positions, feel like I truly know jiu-jitsu before I get myself out there, especially because it's black belt division, right? It's not like I've been, messing around with jiu-jitsu and I'm a blue belt. I'm a black belt and I'm representative of Essential and JT, who's the instructor there, and Brian Glick, who's been my guy. So I just want to really prepare, and potentially have that sort of as a possibility, but do my best to get as good as I can, by doing everything that I can to get good, at jiu-jitsu. I think the international judo is so deep and so athletics dependent that I think those days for me competing at a high level in judo, I think they're gone, And I'm not trying to say like, oh, I could do it in jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that at all, but it's sort of lit a second fire in me again, so just doing more grappling, be the best I can is like sort of my goal for 2023, really.
Excellent. I love that.
And of course, being a good father. That's the next second thing. Of course, not the second thing. That's the first thing, but I got to throw that in there.
Of course, man. Of course. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And well, I'm really happy to hear that. Number one, I'm happy to hear that. Obviously, like I said, I'm glad that the stroke thing is resolved itself. I'm happy to hear that you're rekindled in your pursuit of jiu-jitsu. I think it's going to be awesome to see you get out there and compete at some point if you decide to go and do that.
If you decide
to do it, but if you decide to do, man, it would be so cool to see because it's always neat to see someone with a diverse background like yours.
Sure. And everyone will pull guard though. That's the thing, right? Everyone's going to pull guard.
no one's going to stand
Google me. And then they'll be like, I'm not staying with this guy. Fuck that.
You'd have to be crazy. But still, either way, I think it's really cool. Yeah. And Shintaro, man, I really do appreciate your time today, buddy. Thanks for taking the time to catch up and share your knowledge.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Nice to see you, man.
It's great to see you too again, buddy. Let's do it again really soon.
Yes, for sure.
For anyone out there that wants to keep up with Shintaro, it's really easy to do so. He's most active on Instagram. It's Judo Shintaro NYC. Make sure you guys are following him there. He puts up a lot of great content that you guys are really going to enjoy. So if you're not following him on Instagram, make sure you do. Also, speaking of great content and following him, his YouTube channel is phenomenal. I personally reference it all the time for certain things I'm working on. It's if you type Shintaro Higashi into YouTube, his channel will pop up. Make sure you guys subscribe and hit the little bell icon to get notified when he adds new videos because he adds new content all the time. His website is shintarohigashi.com. That's a great place to keep up with his school, seminars, and all the things like that. shintarohigashi.com. And then, guys, if you're ever passing through New York City, man, he has an outstanding academy in Manhattan, so make sure you drop in and train with him, get some knowledge. If you can't make it to New York City, you can learn from him anywhere in the world here at BJJ Fanatics. He's got several instructionals with us. The one that we spoke about in depth today was Breaking Through the Judo Stiff Arm, which is a great place to start if you're working on your feet. And I really recommend that. BJJFanatics.com, pick it up today. And that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the BJJ Fanatics podcast.